is a severe weather update from the First Coast's most accurate weather team, certified by Weather Rate.
Good evening, folks. I am meteorologist Ross Mumal here with an update for you on what will soon to be Hurricane Helene, but for the time being is still Tropical Storm Helene. Latest 8 p.m. advisory shows her continuing to strengthen, continuing to grow and intensify in the northwestern Caribbean. That center of circulation is just a few hundred miles off the coast of Cancun there from the Yucatan Peninsula. So once Helene finally clears not only the Yucatan but also Cuba and starts to make her way towards the southern Gulf of Mexico, that's really when we're going to start to see some rapid intensification. So here's the latest cone out from the National Hurricane Center, as I had said, at 8 o'clock. Sustained winds still at 60, likely going to gradually increase little by little here over about the next 12 to 18 hours. But by tomorrow afternoon, as it really nears the tip of the Yucatan there, we do expect Helene to intensify into a Category 1 storm potentially with sustained winds of 75 miles per hour. And then once she does make that northward turn into the Gulf, she's pretty much going to make a beeline straight towards Florida's Gulf Coast, and more specifically the Big Bend, making landfall likely as a Category 3 storm by late Thursday evening, really after dinner time Thursday night. So timing wise, we're expecting it somewhere between about 6 and 10 p.m. for an eventual landfall there, likely in Appalachia Bay, anywhere from Apalachicola over to Cedar Key. So this is the area we're zoning in on. Jacksonville itself is not currently in the cone, but this is going to be a very large storm. The radius of the wind field and the rain and the clouds is going to be quite expansive. So even though you might not be in that cone of uncertainty, that does not mean you're going to not experience some of the impacts expected from Hurricane Helene. So this was, I guess, issued earlier at about 5 o'clock this evening. Tropical storm watch in effect for nearly all of the First Coast. Besides Columbia County and Lake City, a hurricane watch is in effect further west and southwest then for Appalachia Bay and really the Tallahassee area. Those folks are in a hurricane warning. Orlando, Tampa, the whole way down to Fort Myers in a tropical storm warning ahead of the anticipated landfall and trek here of Hurricane Helene. Here's just really another way to look at it. Spaghetti models also being very consistent and really just zoning in on Appalachia Bay there just to the east of Apalachicola. Now, storm surge likely not going to be an impact here on the First Coast. At most, Glenn and Camden counties could see about a 2 to 4 foot storm surge. But besides that, we are not expecting really any kind of significant storm surge besides a slight increase in some tidal waters right around high tide come Thursday evening. Now, certainly going to be a different story on the Gulf Coast. Tampa, anywhere from about a 6 to 9 foot storm surge, 10 to 15 foot storm surge from Crystal River all the way over to Apalachicola. So they could certainly see devastating, catastrophic storm surge there along the Gulf Coast, specifically in the Big Bend. So here's what we're looking at over about the next 24 to 48 hours. I had mentioned, once it clears the Yucatan, that's when that rapid intensification is going to start to begin. The storm is going to move over those very warm ocean waters, and the upper air dynamics in the atmosphere are also going to be very conducive for the storm to continue to grow vertically, which really allows it to have that strength. So the warm waters is the fuel, and really the clear air above the storm is going to allow it to grow and intensify more and more as it heads towards the Big Bend there, as I had said, on Thursday evening just after dinner time. But you'll notice it moves northward very quickly then. By the time the sun rises come Friday morning, nearly all of this is going to be out of here, likely going to be up towards Macon, if not toward Atlanta by Friday morning. So the sun will probably be out here come Friday morning. So if you go to bed very early Thursday night and you sleep in a little bit Friday morning, you could miss most of the storm if the wind and the rain don't wake you up. So here's kind of a more zoomed in picture of what we could be expecting over the next several days. Throughout the day on Wednesday, we're going to notice an increase in cloud cover. So partly cloudy skies to start you off Wednesday morning, much more overcast by the late afternoon and early evening. And you're going to start to see the first pockets of moisture, first isolated rain bands begin to move on in. But really, it's not going to be until Thursday morning that some of these heavier bands are going to start to move on in. We could see anywhere from about 2 to 4 inches of rain in total from the entire storm along that I-95 corridor where many of us, or the majority of us, do live there across the First Coast. Now, some of these bands, again, starting on Thursday morning, could bring an isolated tornado risk. Those tornado warnings, if they are issued, will likely be brief because they're going to be very fast moving, but nonetheless, just be aware that from really 6 a.m. Thursday morning through the entire day on Thursday and overnight into Friday, we will still have an isolated tornado risk with some of these outer bands. But nonetheless, 4, 5 o'clock then come Thursday evening, Helene starts to make her way towards the Big Bend. 7:30, 8 o'clock, you can see the eye very defined there. Strongest wind's going to be right around that eye wall. And this is really when our friends out towards I-75 in Lake City are going to be seeing the worst of the impacts. The strongest winds, potentially 75 miles per hour, if not more than that, closer to 80, maybe even 85. And we'll touch on the future wind gusts here in just a little bit. But again, this is going to be bringing significant and potentially catastrophic impacts for folks pretty much from I-75 westward there. But it will pretty much move up past Waycross by 4 or 5 a.m. So as I had said, by sunrise Friday morning, the worst of the storm is out of here. We're still going to see a few isolated showers, and it certainly will still be fairly breezy here across the First Coast. But this will certainly be a Thursday evening and overnight event for a lot of folks. So throughout the day on Wednesday, you're going to notice an uptick in those southeasterly winds. Wind gusts anywhere from about 20 to 25 miles per hour. You head then into your Thursday, midday, you're talking wind gusts 30, 35, even 40 miles per hour. And then once you get into the late afternoon, evening hours, that's when we're going to recommend you stay inside. You try to stay off the roads because wind gusts are going to be pushing closer to 50, 60 miles per hour. You could see a few pockets, especially along the coast, of 65 miles per hour. And typically, those would be severe warned wind gusts. If you get a severe thunderstorm warning, those are typically warned for 60 mile per hour wind gusts. And we always tell you to stay inside and stay away from windows when the winds get up that high. So broken limbs, a few downed trees could be expected as we get the wind gusts closer to that 50 to 60 mile per hour wind gust threshold, and that could certainly lead to some power outages. So I can't emphasize enough, make sure you have your chargers ready, flashlights, candles, things like that. Do not be surprised if you do lose power come Thursday night and into Friday morning. Now, it will likely be short-lived for us here closer to I-95, but the further west you go, towards I-75, towards the Gulf Coast, that's where the strongest wind gusts are going to be seen. That's where you're talking 60 to 70, if not even 80 miles per hour. This current model showing potentially an 85 mile per hour wind gust up in Waycross. So the Swanee Valley, the western sides of the Okefenokee and I-75 are going to see those substantially higher wind gusts throughout much of Thursday evening. But after midnight then, the storm continues to move northward. The wind gusts taper off a little bit. So throughout Friday, at least through Friday morning, they taper off down into the 40s, 30s even for wind gusts. And then by the afternoon, things really quiet down quite a bit. The difference between Helene and Debbie that we saw back in really early to mid-August is going to be, this is going to be much more of a windstorm. Debbie was much more of a rainstorm. The rain here across most of Duval County in the I-95 corridor, we're only talking about 2 to 4 inches. The further west you go, more so into that 3 to 6 inch rain. Locally, higher amounts could be possible in some of those pockets that see the heavier downpours and some of those stronger thunderstorms that are embedded within Helene. So, biggest takeaway, highest rain totals to the west, lower rain totals generally the further east you go. So let's just break it down county by county for you if you are wondering exactly what to expect. Okay, this is going to be an all-day event for everyone here in the First Coast. Here now is the county by county. So Duval specifically, the wettest you're going to be. So when we see the most rain is generally between about 6 a.m. and 6 p.m. That 12-hour window on Thursday is when you'll see the majority of the rain. The winds really aren't going to pick up until the late afternoon. So from 5 p.m. onward through the overnight period, that's going to be when it is the windiest here again. Wind gusts upwards of about 50 to 60 miles per hour, and everyone will see that isolated tornado risk starting early Thursday morning, and that will continue through your entire day Thursday evening there. So back out further west, Columbia, Bradford, Union, Baker counties, the worst of it's really going to be just before it makes landfall. We expect that between 6 and 10 o'clock. So starting at 6 up until midnight, the worst you're going to see. That's where the highest and strongest wind gusts are. Certainly could see flying debris, a lot of downed trees, potentially a lot of downed power lines. So anticipate power outages if you live out in some of our western counties, western areas, and especially in some of those more rural areas and communities. It's going to take a little bit longer to get the power back on in some of those spots. Tornadoes also still going to be a possibility or impact for some of those folks. Now, up into southeast Georgia, Ware, Charlton, Brandley, Pierce counties, worst of the storm between 11 p.m. and 5 a.m. Friday morning. Still those wind gusts, 70, potentially upwards of 80 miles per hour. Back down south now, not nearly as bad. Down in St. Johns and Flagler counties, worst of the storm between 3 p.m. and 3 a.m. Still going to see that isolated tornado risk, but similar to Duval County, wind gusts closer to about 50 to 60. And Clay and Putnam counties, also a similar story there with the worst 12 hours of the storm between about 2 p.m. and 2 a.m. And last but not least, Glenn, Camden, Nassau counties, our southeast coastal Georgia counties, worst of the storm between 6 p. and 6 a. And this is going to be the only area that does potentially see a little bit of some storm surge. So pretty much from Brunswick down to Fernandina Beach could see a storm surge of about 2 to 4 feet. The rest of us, especially in the St. Johns River, might see a slight uptick in water height, especially around high tide Thursday. But otherwise, we are not expecting dangerous or any sort of life-threatening storm surge with any of this, or at least to the point that you would have to evacuate your home. We do not expect that. Really just some minor rainfall, street flooding and things up along those lines. Now, one other thing I just kind of want to keep in mind, depending on what you experience, for folks in Duval County, we're going to see the severe 60-mile-per-hour winds. That really just means broken tree limbs and potentially for some power outages. Now, folks out towards I-75, you get into those hurricane force winds, the 75 to 80-mile-per-hour wind gusts. That's when you're going to start to see some minor roof damage, a lot of broken limbs, a lot of trees down, especially since we've had so much rain. The ground's very saturated. Those roots going to be a little bit looser in the ground, so it's not going to take nearly as much wind to knock some of those trees down. And that, of course, will then lead to extensive power outages. And as I had said, in those more rural communities and areas, might take a little bit longer to get the power back on. And then anywhere that does see those Category 2 winds, that's going to be very, very close to the coastline there in Appalachia Bay. That's really where we're going to see extensive damage and potentially catastrophic issues for folks there. So really, this is kind of everything in a nutshell that you need to know. Again, we're going to be tracking this over the next 48 hours. Jacksonville, 40 to 60 mile per hour wind gusts. Lake City, 75 to potentially 80 miles per hour. We're going to have more updates on this coming up on the First Coast News at 11. Thanks for watching.